Do you want to write great songs? Maybe you've never written anything before, or maybe you're tired of staring at the wall, praying that the universe blesses you with another good idea. Or maybe you just need to get some fresh inspiration for your creative process. Regardless, if you want to learn how to write better songs more consistently and with better results, then this is going to be a good series for you. I'm going to break down my step-by-step process of how I try to teach songwriting from the absolute ground up. Starting in this first video, I want to cover the 5 things that I kind of look at as the main elements to songwriting that everybody should know. A lot of this might feel like information that you already know, but I recommend watching it through the end anyway because it's going to lay a helpful foundation for where we go in future videos, and it's going to offer you a different perspective. Plus, if you stick with me until the end, I'm going to show you an easy trick that I use to get song ideas out of my head and finished faster, as well as a free download that you can use as your own cheat sheet for whenever you feel stuck in a rut with your own ideas. Here we go. I'm Isaac Sharp. I've spent the last 12 years working as a producer, writer, engineer, and business owner in Nashville, Tennessee. I've worked in some major studios with signed and indie artists alike and had the opportunity to make and learn from some insanely talented people that I get to call my friends. This channel is an attempt to share some of the insights and processes that I wish that I had known about when I first started trying to make music and when I started trying to make a career out of it. Whether you're an artist, an entrepreneur, a coffee lover, or a writer, there's gonna be something here for you. Hey guys, I just want to cut in really quickly just to say this. This is a brand new YouTube channel. If any of you know me, you know that I've put out some videos on TikTok and on Instagram, but this is my first experience with YouTube and with long form content. And to be honest, I have no idea what I'm doing. There's a lot of gurus out there who are going to tell you that they have all the answers, that they know exactly what to do. And if you just follow their 5 steps that you're going to make a ton of money, that's not me. I'm just a guy that gets to work in an industry that I love, I get to do what I love, and I want to help as many people as I can be able to follow their dream and do that. So please, comment on these first few videos. Let me know what it is that you want to know more about. Let me know what seems to be helping you, what doesn't help you. I promise if you just comment and tell me, I will make a video literally just for you and I will post it. So like and subscribe. Let me know what it is that I can do to make this an even better channel for you. And with all that out of the way, let's get to it. All right, so when I look at songwriting, I tend to break it down into 5 different areas that I start to think about pretty early on in the process when I have my initial idea. Those areas are feel and structure, timing, key and progression, melody, and lyrics. And I know that that might seem like a strange way to break it all up at first, but I promise if you stick with me, you're gonna understand in the end why I do it and why I look at it this way. I want to start by making sure that we understand each of these things pretty fully, because what I've found is most of the writers that I meet and that I work with tend to have a pretty solid grasp on 1 or 2 of these things, but almost everybody that I've ever worked with has at least one of these areas that they could use work in. And to be honest, there's a lot of writers I know that have at least one of these areas that they've never even thought about. So by starting here, we can create a really good foundation to use anytime we feel like we get off track or we get stuck in our writing. One last quick caveat. I'm making a couple of assumptions here with this video. If you're wanting to learn about songwriting, then I'm going to assume that you already know a few basics about music. Specifically, I'm going to assume that you know how to play an instrument, at least well enough to play some basic chords in a major and minor shape. Also, I'm going to assume that you have a general sense of how rhythm in music works, at least as far as like what a quarter note is, the fact that we have bars in music. If you do need a crash course in either of those things, leave a comment below the video and I'll make a video on it just for you guys. But if I tried to cover all of that in this video, we'd be here for over an hour. You guys would never watch the whole way through and YouTube would never show my videos to anybody. So that being said, let's dive in. Starting out with number 1, the most foundational element of songwriting to me is that every song has to have a specific feel and a specific structure. I remember I read in a Jimmy Webb book a while ago that a good way to think about songwriting is to think about it a lot like building a house, and I love that idea. If you think about it, then the feel is the vision in your head of what that house is gonna look like, smell like, all of the energy it's gonna convey. The structure, on the other hand, is the physical shell and frame of that house and how you choose to put it all together. That structure has to be capable of showing off your vision while staying sturdy enough to stop the whole thing from collapsing on itself. Likewise, a song without a solid vision and a solid structure can easily stop you from ever finishing it. Or even worse, you might finish it just to find out that you have an ugly, confusing house with rooms that don't make sense, and nobody that ever comes over understands what it is that you were going for in the first place. And that really is what I want to try to avoid, is that moment where you have this song that you're so excited about and you show it to people and they just don't get it, because that sucks. I'm going to dive deeper in another video on structure and feel because I think that they're that important. But for right now, what you need to know is that each song takes us on a journey with how it's structured. Typically, we learn in the first verse what's happening, who the characters are, and what's going on between them. In the first chorus, we typically find out that how we should feel about everything going on. Often, we're led to a bridge where the consequences of what's happening all come crashing to a head. And this might sound cookie cutter, but I promise that you can apply it to 99% of popular songs and it still makes sense. And the reason for that is, once we know the vision for the emotion that we're trying to impart on our listeners, structure is the path that we take them on as we lead them through the house. It determines what order we show them the rooms in, how long the tour lasts, and it plays a big role in how the listener experiences our emotions. But how do we decide what vision we have for the house? That's where we start talking about feel. The next time that you're coming up with an idea or just listening to a song in general, I want you to stop and ask yourself, what emotion am I supposed to feel here? Do I feel sad? Do I feel angry? What's the tone overall? Do I feel like I want to whisper this to one person in a quiet room? Or do I want to scream it in a crowded room full of people? Knowing what our tone is and how we want people to feel is going to help inform every single decision that we make in the rest of the song process. It's going to tell us what chords we want to use. It's going to tell us how loud we want to sing it, how many instruments should go on the production. Everything all comes back to what intended emotion and vision we had for this song. And I know a lot of you are going to ask, how do I even know what the vibe should be? And the answer to that is that you kind of have to be self-observant to how it's making you feel hearing it and singing it. When you're driving around and you're listening to the idea in the car, what energy does it give to you? There's not really a right answer. Songs can go in just about any direction that you can imagine, but the key is to pick a lane and stick to it. Pick an emotion that you want to leave people feeling and chase it intentionally for a while and see where it takes you. If after a while you don't like it, then go back and start again with a different vibe. No one says that you have to go with the first direction that you can come up with. Sometimes it might take me 2 or 3 or 15 different iterations of an idea just to find a direction that I end up liking. My point is, experiment intentionally and see what happens. Drafts and voice memo apps on your phone exist for a reason, and you should be using them. So just like building a house, once you know what you want the feel to be and you have a rough idea of what the structure is going to look like, it can always change, but once you know the direction, the next step is to pour a foundation that holds everything in place, which brings us to number 2. Timing. If you've ever written a song idea that you liked a lot, but you felt like your verses and your choruses didn't fit well together, among other things, there's a pretty good chance that timing might be part of your issue. Now, timing in music can refer to a few different things. On a large scale, it refers to the sense of how fast or how slow you should play a song. Zoomed in a little bit more, it refers to how long you should hold out each individual note that you play. And it can even go further and talk about how far ahead or behind the metronome beat that you are while you're playing. Time is what gives us our structure, and it gives us a sense of foundation that makes songs feel cohesive and stable, especially when playing with other people. When you combine that with feel and structure, timing gives us everything we need to have a house that we can tell any kind of story that we want inside of. For the purpose of this video, we're going to focus primarily on the first part of that timing element, which is the overall speed of the song. You probably already know this, but just in case you didn't, we call that tempo. If you've ever tapped your foot to a song that you're listening to, you're keeping track of the tempo of the song. We call each of those foot taps beats, and we count the number of those beats in a minute to get the BPM or the overall tempo that we're going to play the song at. Now, there are a few exceptions, but 99.9% of the songs that you're going to hear on the radio are going to be the same tempo from the beginning of the song to the end of the song. And this is because it helps us to stay consistent and to tell a story without ever getting distracting or becoming confusing. And before you start commenting and telling me, I know that there are plenty of times that people break the rules. I know that there are plenty of places where we change tempos, and there's plenty of really good reasons to. And I even know that it happens with some top 20 popular songs. But as a rule, starting out, try to keep your tempo the same way from the beginning of the song to the end of the song. It's gonna help you out a lot. Now, the real question is, at what point in this process of songwriting does that tempo start to exist and start to mean something? A lot of songwriters I work with generally don't think about it until they start thinking about drums during production and recording, and that's even if they think about it then. But that tempo is inherently there from the very beginning. When you first come up with your idea, if you record it and you play it back, you're usually going to notice that you can tap along with your foot and feel a sense of that rhythm. But oftentimes, when we're trying to come up with that first initial idea, we don't take the time to pay attention or to think about how slow or fast we're playing, and we tend to fluctuate a lot. Sometimes so much so that different sections of our song end up not even fitting together and being two totally different tempos. That's why being intentional about what your tempo is can radically change the way that you approach songwriting and even the feel of your songs as you're writing them. I recommend you download a metronome app on your phone and you can play along with it. I'll show you what I mean. So I've got a metronome app on my phone. I'm gonna open it up, type it in, metronome. It looks like this. I like it a lot. You should get it. I'm gonna keep it where it is at 78. So this is an 8th note subdivision, so there's 8 beats per bar. And I might go, if I were to sing a song, it would sound like this. Don't wanna feel like we're just marching in line, just to watch more bullets fly. All the while you're in the back of my mind, in a yellow sundress in the park that night. Well, so you notice how at that tempo, it has this kind of like nostalgic, retrospective sort of feel to it. But what happens if I speed it up? So let's go to 88, which is a good bit faster. And let's try it here. Don't wanna feel like we're just marching in line, just to watch more bullets fly. All the while you're in the back of my mind, in a yellow sundress in the park that night. Well, so you'll notice that has a much faster kind of drive and a pace to it. And that might be the right thing, that might be the wrong thing. It really just depends on the lyric, it depends on the song. Again, it depends on what your vision is. Just changing the speed makes it totally different. So what happens if I slow it down instead and make it slower than 82? So if we go to, let's say, 78, we go 76. Don't wanna feel like we're just marching in line, just to watch more bullets fly. All the while you're in the back of my mind, in a yellow sundress in the park that night. But who shot first doesn't matter now. We're digging out the trenches and the bombs are falling down. But we keep making up signs to draw these battle lines. Notice how much more somber that feels, or how much more like an intimate conversation between just you and me that kind of takes on when I make it that slower tempo. So what you want to be asking is, what tempo conveys the emotion that I want people to feel while they're listening? For example, my lyric was, ain't it funny that we're marching in line? If we hear that at the faster tempo, people might actually genuinely think that I want it to be funny. And when they hear it at the slower tempo, that line suddenly starts to take on a bit of irony, that obviously it's not funny that we're marching in line. So a good first place to start with any new idea that you have is to take a metronome out and practice playing it in time, but also to experiment playing it faster and slower. I guarantee you that you're gonna be a little bit shocked by what just that small change can do for the emotional context of your song. All right, so now we have our foundation, we have the frame of our house built, and we have a vision for what we think we might want the song to feel like overall. But now we need some tools to help us kind of contextualize what we want people to be feeling emotionally. And this is where I like to start picking a key and finding a chord progression. So when it comes to a key, there are people out there that say that they can feel a difference in emotion depending on what key the song is in. For instance, some people say that G feels happier than F. Some people say that E flat is the saddest key. Personally, I've never been able to really distinctly hear that. Not saying that that isn't the case, but what I do know is that the key directly influences what range of notes you're able to sing in. As an example, if we go back to my original idea that I was singing before, I'm playing it in G major. And and it sounds like it's kind of in the upper middle register of my voice. And that's a pretty good spot for me. But if I wanted the song to have a bit more energy and a bit more intensity, then I could experiment with raising the key even further and shifting that melody to a slightly higher part of my register. And if I tried it, that would sound a bit like this. So just for context, this is where I was. This is our G major. Don't feel like we're just making up signs just to draw these battle lines. But if I shifted it higher, don't feel like we're just marching in line just to watch more bullets fly. All the while you're in the back of my mind in a yellow sundress in the park that night. So you feel that has a little bit more energy and a little bit more intensity to it. And it's probably a little too high for me, which is probably why I would stick with the G major. But it shows you an example of how you can kind of slide stuff around. Alternatively, if I wanted to make the song sound less intense and maybe a little bit more intimate, like a private conversation between me and one other person, I might drop the key and then it kind of have this sort of a feel to it. So, don't feel like we're just marching in line just to watch more bullets fly. All the while you're in the back of my mind in a yellow sundress in the park that night. So you can feel how that kind of has a different attitude to it. It feels more longing. It feels more sort of hurt and isolated, or at least vulnerable, if nothing else. So which one is best? Honestly, that just depends on what my original vision was for the feel of this song. In this case, I think that little idea to me felt like it wanted to be kind of in the middle, somewhere around that 82 mark, somewhere that isn't too angsty and too intense, but also isn't quite so sad and intimate. So this is just an example that when you pick your key, you can use it to help put different melodies in different parts of your vocal register, and it gives you just another tool to help change the tone and the emotion based on the feeling that you want people to have when they're listening. Now, one important note is everyone's voice is different. Your voice is gonna have a range that it sounds best in. Some people are gonna have a wider range, and some people are gonna have a more narrow range. You have to find the right balance and not write something that's in such a high or low part of your voice that you can barely sing it. Even if you want to be able to belt, even if you want to be able to do stuff, it's not going to translate well. And then one last tip is if you're writing for other people, you still want to pick the best keys for your voice to convey the emotion that you want them to hear whenever they're listening to it. Then when they go to sing it, they're going to want to change the key to try to find a similar spot that works for them. Progression. Progression is my favorite part of songwriting. Our melody typically tells us the story of how we feel, but the progression gives context to that sense of how we feel. It expands and explains further. Basically, progression just refers to the pattern of chords that we're using in a song. For example, in the song that I've been using in this video as kind of a demonstration, I've been playing C major, G major, E minor, D major. But when I moved to different keys, the pattern never changed. I just moved each chord up and down the same amount, and all the relationships between them stayed the same. That's why in Nashville, most songwriters and musicians use what we call the number system to talk about chords. Basically, once we know what key we're in, we start numbering chords starting on the first note of the scale. So if we were in G, G would be number 1, and we would give a number to every note in the scale after that. So A is 2, B is 3, C is 4, so on and so forth. The reason why we do this is because it helps us to see the patterns in chords and not just chord names. The other reason is because if we need to change the key, if a different singer comes in, or if we want to experiment with it differently, it's as easy as just thinking of the new scale and then playing the same numbers. Now, I'll make a video on numbers and why I think it's really important that everybody uses the number system, but for right now, the thing that I want you to learn is that what chord patterns you play will radically change how your song feels. My idea so far has had this kind of longing, retrospective, or melancholy vibe, and that's partially because of the pattern that I'm using. If I wanted the song to have a more angsty or angry energy, then I might use a pattern like this. 2, 3, 4. Don't feel like we're just marching in line just to watch more bullets fly. All the while you're in the back of my mind in a yellow sundress in the park that night. Or if I wanted the song to be more happy, I could go with a happier chord progression and do something that sounds kind of like this. Don't feel like we're just marching in line just to watch more bullets fly. All the while you're in the back of my mind in a yellow sundress in the park that night. So you notice how it's really hard playing the happy chord progression for that song to even sound remotely angry or remotely sad. Some chord progressions have a stronger pull or power than others, mostly because we're so used to hearing them in relationship with certain kinds of songs. Hopefully that gives you a basic idea of how powerful chord patterns and progressions can be. When you listen to your song or others, I really hope that you start listening to what patterns and progressions that you hear and what context they lend to the emotion of the song. In fact, that just gave me an idea. I'm gonna make a short video soon that kind of has a way that you can journal and keep track of some of your favorite songs and the patterns and the progressions that they use, so that especially if you're just starting out writing, you can kind of have a well to pull from of patterns that you've grown accustomed to and patterns that you feel drawn to in songs that you like. Hopefully that'll be helpful, but moving on. Melody. Even more than progressions, the melody is going to be the single tool that you use the most to convey how you're feeling about your lyric. If you go back to our house metaphor where we're taking people room to room to room, the melody is going to be how you show them how you feel about what's happening in each room. In general, we refer to the pattern of how melody moves up and down over the course of a phrase a melodic arc, and there are a few guidelines that we can loosely use to help us with it. Generally, a melody that arcs upwards or goes from lower to higher notes is going to build energy and feel happier or more intense. A melody that arcs downwards and goes from higher to lower notes is going to tend to feel more sad or more reserved. And so you can kind of use that as a way. If you're writing a big power anthem happy song, you might want to arc that melody up. Or if you're writing a breakup song, you might want to arc that melody down. Additionally, a melody that goes from one note to the note right next to it isn't going to have a whole lot of drama to it. It's going to feel very conversational and very fluid. But a melody that jumps from one note and skips several notes, or even an octave, is going to feel much more dramatic and intense, and sometimes even argumentative. One of my favorite examples to use to show this is the Imagine Dragons song, Radioactive. The first line of the chorus jumps an entire octave up before it begins to arc back down, and it's hard to write a song that's much more intense than that. If you listen, it goes, I'm waking up, I feel it in my bones. I'm waking up, I feel it. That's a huge jump, and when you listen in context to the song, it feels so explosive. But just to show you, this is what it would have sounded like if instead of jumping that whole octave, they had decided to just jump a few notes instead and give it a little less energy. Would have gone, I'm waking up, I feel it in my bones, enough to make my systems blow. Totally different. If that had been the melody they went with all those big giant drums and all the distortion and everything happening, it would have sounded so lame. The fact that they jumped that giant gap and they were intentional about it fit with the vision that they had for the song. They wanted it to explode. It makes so much sense. Everything about that song, whether you like it or not, comes together to tell the story that they set out to tell when they wrote it. So we've talked about our foundation, we've talked about our frame, we've talked about key and progression, we've talked about melody. The very last thing that we need to talk about is lyrics. Most people consider lyrics to be 50% of songwriting. In fact, there are people that have made entire careers off of just writing lyrics and never contributing melody, never contributing chords. A lot of them didn't even know how to play an instrument. I personally recommend that every songwriter should be well-rounded and able to write entire songs and pieces by themselves. But I can't deny that there are people that have made a living purely just writing lyrics. If there's one place that you should be as well-rounded as possible, it's in your lyric writing. Lyrics are going to tell the listener exactly what happened. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. All of those things come into play with lyrics. We could spend hours and hours talking about how to get better at lyrics, and I intend to. But there's one place that I want you to start right now, and that's that you should be thinking about your lyrics like a short story. Stories, like songs, have beginnings that hook people in. They have builds that make you more and more interested in what the outcome's going to be, and they typically have a strong climactic moment where things either all fall apart or they all come together or something unexpected happens. Some stories are going to have a clean and neat resolution and ending. Some of them just tail off at the end and leave you forever wondering how it actually ended. But the point is that the best stories put you in the middle of something. They transport you somewhere where you can almost hear and feel and smell and see exactly what's happening around you. Good songs need to be doing that too. Now, obviously we're limited on words and we don't have visuals to aid us, but we can still use descriptive imagery. We can still use metaphors, we can still use colorful words to paint a vivid picture of what's happening around us. Things like rhyme, meter, phrasing, tone, tense, energy, All of those things play huge into lyric writing, and we're gonna go really deep on that in time. But for right now, none of that matters if you don't know what story you're trying to tell and how you want people to feel about it. So when you're thinking of your idea or when you're listening to somebody else's song, I really want you to think about what story are they trying to tell? Who are the characters? What are their relationships? What happens in the first few lines that introduces us to the story? How do they want us to feel about the story? How does it develop? How does it ultimately end? What would the lyrics have felt like if they were from the other person's perspective? I want you to sit there and be thinking about, like, what is the overall point here and how am I supposed to feel about it? That's going to go a long way towards jumpstarting the fundamental of how you should be thinking about lyric writing. All right, so to recap, those are the 5 key elements to writing a song. Just like building a house, you start out by deciding what you want it to look like and making a vision for the whole thing. Then you make a structure that takes your vision and lays it out and frames it in an orderly way that makes sense. Then you can use timing as a foundation to hold everything together, to keep it cohesive and to keep it from falling apart. You use your key and your chord progression to begin to give context to the emotion or to kind of show people how to feel about what's happening in each room of your house. After that, your melody and your lyric are going to work together to tell you exactly what's happening and to show you how the singer wants you to feel about what's happening. If you made it this far, you might be saying, this is all great, but how do I use it to actually write a song today? And while I think it's important to understand these concepts and have a foundation, I didn't want to leave you without something that you can use to get the ideas out of your head and on paper right now. So because of that, in the description below, I've included a link to a document that I made that you can use to help find a solid direction for your ideas. It starts out with a few simple prompts, just asking questions to help you think about what you want your vision to be, and then it goes from there to talk about some of the things that we've shown in this video to give you the steps you need to finish putting it all together. I even include a video of myself working through it just to make sure that you know the steps and how it works. Well, that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this video was helpful. It ended up a little bit longer than I wanted, but I'm so grateful to any of you that actually stuck around to the end with me. If thinking about writing this way has helped you out, or if you have any more questions that I can answer, please like and comment on the video, and I will get back to every single one of you. And if you want to continue diving deep into learning songwriting with this kind of a thought process, please consider subscribing to the channel so that YouTube will know to show you the next video in the series. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Isaac Sharp, and I can't wait to hear what you guys write.